Hi, my name's Dave Price, and it's great to have Peter Burke back on the show. Peter, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very good, Dave. How are you?
Very well indeed. Enjoying all the sunshine at the moment.
Sunshine and new puppies, I hear.
And new puppies indeed, yes, 4-month-old Labradors are literally sitting under my seat at the moment, though. Might be interrupting the interview a little bit later. We shall see how that goes. Well, no, really good to chat to you again. And last time we were talking about co-housing, and I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into that, specifically more into the alternative view of HMOs and co-living. But before I did, there's probably a lot of people who haven't actually seen the original chat we had. So, okay, just to give a quick summary at the moment of what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So my background's always been in finance. More latterly, I was involved in property finance. And I kind of had that urge to kind of do it myself, following the kind of green approach, green living, green agenda build. So yeah, I stumbled across co-housing. So what is co-housing? Co-housing it's an intentional community. So it's an intentional community whereby a group of people who've got a shared interest or purpose come together. Each of them have their own house or apartment, but it's kind of set up in a way where it's very kind of interlinked community. Slightly smaller properties that might be on the market, and you have shared green spaces and shared amenity spaces. Cars are usually parked on the outside. So there's this real kind of intentionality about people meeting and seeing each other daily and really developing that kind of community around them. And yeah, we help groups and we help people come together and do that. That's kind of our thing, really. We facilitate the process. And we facilitate the kind of conversations and the whole kind of co-creation and design of those developments. And yeah, that's kind of really a good summary of what co-housing is.
Yeah, because one thing I just wanted to say on that, because some people who don't really know it or understand it, it's that, oh, is that just some sort of hippie commune type thing? And it's so much more than that when we talked last time. I just wanted, can you give some sort of like brief examples like that? So people haven't got that outdated view of what co-living is.
Yeah, I mean, hippie commune is the thing that people kind of align to most when we talk about it. But I mean, there's so many examples around the world. It really came from Scandinavia, Denmark. It's quite big in kind of northern Central Europe, America. And really kind of it's not alternative, it's different. And I think that's the main part of it, really. It's people who really do want to connect more. We're living in a world where we're connected by our smartphones, we're connected by everything is easy to connect, but we're actually more disconnected than ever. People are isolated, people are lonely, and it just doesn't seem right. So a lot of people are taking this into their own hands. In the UK, I wouldn't say co-housing is particularly big. It's got a big following, it's got a big movement of people, but there's not enough developments have happened, which is really why we see there's a gap in the market for us as I suppose, a co-housing developer.
Got you. Yeah. And the thing is, it does make sense on so many different levels. The more you understand it, the more sense the whole thing makes. So that's co-housing overall. So today I wanted to sort of like delve a little bit deeper into alternative HMOs or co-living.
So what is co-living? I mean, co-living compared to co-housing is where you've got a smaller space. There's a lot of kind of urban city centre co-living projects, which are quite large apartment blocks. You've got a room or a studio, but there's a lot of kind of shared amenity spaces, kitchens, dining, kind of lounge spaces. It's really about how people who live maybe more of a fast-paced life in the city or out and about more have smaller private space, but more shared amenity space. And the bigger they are, the more money you spend, I suppose, the more amenity you get, like swimming pools and gyms and, roof terraces and all that kind of stuff. So I think, co-living is really probably more aligned in this country and growing throughout Europe and the world is very much kind of a young professional Whether that's because they're being priced out the market or because this is the kind of lifestyle they want, there'd be different arguments for both, I would say, and it's probably a combination of the two. But yeah, I think there's this kind of real space these days, especially more so in an urban or suburban setting for this kind of co-living lifestyle, where you can probably live in a place that you wouldn't be able to afford yourself. And I think that's a big driver, is the monetary value of living in a co-living space. You get the location, but a slightly smaller private space usually.
Because when you talk about that, I'm imagining the new student blocks in university city centres, where there's a communal gym, communal pool, that sort of thing, but you're living in actually smaller accommodation yourself, maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's smaller private space, more amenity space. And yeah, there's that kind of connection in terms of you're around those people more, you're going into those shared spaces more. So again, you've got more of that connection. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. I think some developers and some student developers, kind of push the size of the properties down, fit more in, all of that kind of stuff. But that does happen everywhere these days. So I think there's good examples, and there's kind of more different examples, let's call them. But let's I think that the whole premise of it really is about, it's still got that element of shared lifestyle, where you're connected with people who are doing or in and around the same sort of thing. So I didn't have them when I was a student. So they were terrible old houses or run down apartment blocks when I was a student. So that's
very different nowadays. Yes,
it's definitely changed.
But so just to drill down on that definition, the difference between co-housing and co-living, is that just size, or?
Yeah, I would say that the key difference is the size of unit. I think that the primary difference that we see at the moment in co-housing and co-living is that intentionality of the community. Co-housing is really kind of this eco-village co-housing. It's very much built on kind of connection, sustainability, this kind of shared lifestyle. Co-living is probably being created because of how expensive property has become over time, and it makes it easier for people to afford something that they wouldn't usually be able to afford in terms of location. So they've taken a hit on the size of space they've got, but they're living in the city centre, or they're living close to where they need to live. I think, in terms of where we're looking to go in this kind of alternative HMO and this alternative space, is take the good stuff from co-housing and put it into co-living. So bring that intentionality, make sure that the people that are going to live in these spaces, whether it's, a 7-bed house or a 30-bed house or development, that you are still bringing that kind of shared intentional community spirit, kind of how people are living. And I think there's a real gap in that market for kind of more urban style property, more urban style living.
Got it. So the co-housing seems to be very much intention you keep using. It's a group, similar interests, potentially, that sort of thing, getting together to want to do the co-housing, whereas co-living seems to be more designed by somebody else, but it happens to suit the individual. Would that be a fair?
Yeah, I think that's a really good definition, actually. I think co-living is designed and developed by builders and architects and developers, a housing product to sell or rent out. Co-housing is usually a group of people coming together and actually doing it themselves, actually creating that project themselves. So yeah, I think that's a good point, really. The co-living space is definitely a kind of build to rent. It's from people who are professional in that market and seeing it as an opportunity, rather than a group of people saying, this is how we want to design and build this specifically. Probably is where we're seeing the gaps, actually, is bringing people into that kind of conversation about how would you design your co-living space.
Yeah, which I love the idea of. And so where were you? Because you're talking about alternative HMOs now within this.
Yeah, so I suppose it's just what we've created is the alternative HMO is really come from talking to people who are in that kind of living situation, not loving it, kind of being quite soulless. You know, you don't know who the people are next door. You know, ultimately it's a landlord who owns them, rents them, his or her kind of, you know, main priority is to fill those rooms. What we see as an opportunity with this kind of big house co-living is to bring the kind of cooperative principles to this. So whilst there will be a property, it's kind of like when you're living in it, you run it yourself. And I think in the rental market, we don't have that enough. You know, if you've got that kind of trust of people, and there's a, you know, a clear agreement, there's a clear contract there. You know, if something needs fixing, you don't need to ring the agent who needs to ring the landlord who needs to come back and tell the agent that they can go and get somebody out on their list and, you know, fix the tap. If you can fix a tap, you know, or you can fix a, you know, if you can fix something or something needs changing or you want to paint the walls, but yeah, you've got to paint them back at the end. It creates a more, you know, a sense of belonging for people in the rental system, you know, where we're all in this space now where it's so hard to get on the property ladder. There's so much of that kind of 18 to even 40-year-olds these days who are really struggling. And I think what our idea around this alternative HMO is an opportunity to be part of something bigger than just, you know, okay, I rent this place, it's my house, I'll stay here, it's my room. What we're kind of seeing with this is an opportunity for people to run it their way, but for it to be designed and developed in a way that property investors would. So we're doing it, you know, to attract investment. We're doing it in the right legal structures, but we're doing it in a way where the governance of that business, the governance of that project lies with people who are residents and tenants. And to the same extent, because there is a cooperative as part of this, those people then can kind of run that cooperative and maybe invest in it themselves and actually get a part of something bigger than just renting a property and never feeling like home. And I think that's a big part of what goes on in Europe, these, you know, forever, you know, there's kind of this secure tenancy in Europe where people don't really need to buy. They don't really see the point of buying. They're happy, you know, their rents are pegged. They're, you know, they're in a good place. Why would they move? And they look after that place like it's their own, but it never is. And I think Britain's kind of missed that a little bit. And I'd like, you know, we'd like to see a little part of that back in this space.
It feels as though it's sort of like an HMO model, but with the right intentions of the individuals there and taking ownership and management to a certain extent of the property over.
Yeah.
So just to get so if we use an example, what would be a typical example of something like this we can use just to talk about? Would it be like a 5-bed HMO or?
Yeah. I mean, we've just done a 4-bed HMO. We're actually looking at a slightly larger one, which is up to 30, but anything in between, you know, I think 7-10 bedrooms, which is a good sort of sized old property that's being converted into an HMO. I think that's a good example, you know, a 7 to 10 bed kind of HMO is a good example to kind of think about.
Right, because I can totally get my head around that. 7-bed HMO in the traditional way HMOs are run and managed. So would we be looking at the same sort of property as traditional HMO?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Right. So then what are the differences between a traditional HMO and how you're running the co-living?
So the main things would be how we would renovate that property at the beginning, or how we might kind of change the layout. We would definitely put some emphasis on some communal spaces. We definitely make sure there's enough space for 7 individuals to hang out, to cook a dinner, you know, to kind of have that sense and feeling of home. Not that they have to stay with each other for the whole night, or, you know, it's like, can we bring in a way that is, traditional, how you would if you lived in your own home at home, this kind of family unit. All right, 7 individuals you don't know, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to get on with them and like them, it's kind of, so we would implement more of this kind of governance structure, this kind of way of living. And that goes back to this kind of pre-let stage that we would bring in, which is very similar to what we do in co-housing, which is where you bring people together who've got similar sort of idea or interests, principles, way of living, wanting to live this way. So it's definitely a bit more work from a landlord perspective. We're definitely putting more emphasis on how we bring people together, which is, a skill of ours. But then what we would then, I suppose, expect is for people to then take ownership and management of that property like it's their own, and that's the key part of it. Is there's got to be some hope and trust there that they treat it like their own. And obviously we would have a letting, overview on that, a management overview on that, to check that the property was, being lived in properly. But it's up to people to kind of take that ownership. And if there's a problem, then deal with it like adults and have that conversation, and really have that sense of belonging and kind of ownership together.
And you mentioned there pre-let. So you're talking about talking tenants and getting a group of tenants together before you've actually even potentially got the property.
Yeah. And we're definitely seeing a bit more of a challenge with that kind of pre-let, because obviously rental markets are fast and moving space. Your kind of tenancies up, you've got to give a month's notice. It's kind of, you've got to move quite quickly. But we really want to kind of develop this kind of community, the Rethink community, where people start to connect, more, where we spend time with them more, and really start to, we do a lot of surveying, we do a lot of initial conversations with tenants. And then what we'll do from that point onwards is we'll really sort of start to highlight the things of interest to them and start to connect people. We become like a matchmaking service on that basis. But, that really starts to create that community before people move in, and create that kind of belonging and ownership structure as early as possible. We're definitely finding it a bit more difficult, but this is where it's kind of this fast moving pace that we just need to kind of to tweak that pre-let process a little bit more.
Right. So the property itself wouldn't be terribly different from a standard HMO, but just with more communal space, communal dining area, kitchen area, social area, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's really then down to how the tenants actually co-live with each other. And again, it's getting the people with the right attitude, with the right sort of approach for this. So again, talk me through how you're actually doing that at the moment.
So we've done it very traditionally initially. We've kind of done a lot of open rent marketing. We've done some Facebook advertising, put it out to our own networks. And we're just starting to kind of fuse and combine those 3 things. So I suppose what we're doing is we are acting more like a kind of alternative HMO letting agent. So, the emphasis of what we do really is to kind of bring those people in, really start to speak to them, get them connected, let them start to have those conversations themselves, pre-select each other, and then they come back and we would then go through the standard kind of tenancy processes. The other option we got, which we've started to speak to a couple of people about, is if a landlord maybe who's got an HMO or another property has kind of had enough of the rental sector, or wants a longer term contract, we could definitely do this kind of long-term rent to rent, or this long-term rental strategy where we could take on the letting of that property. You might get a couple of people who are already living there, who've come to us, like the idea, and we can kind of flip that property into kind of a big house co-living property and manage it for landlords. So for us, it's like the ecosystem. We're not looking to be the owners of all these properties. We are looking to kind of steward them, manage them in a traditional letting agent way, going a little bit further in terms of the governance and how we bring people together, and the marketing and bringing more people in. And then on the side, if properties come about that we like the look of, then we're able to go and kind of renovate them and bring them back into the kind of overall property network we've got. But then what you've got at the top is the tenants are effectively the owners of these properties, as in, they are, no, I'll change that. They're not the owners, they're the stewards of the property in a cooperative sense. They own a share in the company, and they get to kind of change the philosophy and the culture of how that property business is run.
Because when you say having a share in the property, it does feel that way. You want them to feel as though that they've got an ownership, even though they actually haven't. I was just wondering, do you do anything differently in respect of the tenancy agreements and the management side to promote that sort of sense of belonging?
So from the tenancy perspective, I think it's pretty standard. It's kind of like people have to know there's a set of boundaries. But I think from the management side of it, it's kind of like we would set a budget, we would have a budget for each property. And I think if people want to do stuff themselves, we can give them that budget to go and do the work themselves, or we hire someone in to do the work for them if it's, more technical. From a management perspective, the added value that we're bringing in here is that kind of human connection, whereby we are trusting people through the governance. We're giving people the option to be in control and kind of manage their own property. But we would expect this kind of two-way reciprocal conversation going on. I'd probably see in the future that being some form of technology, an app or something, which makes it a lot easier to run. But I think it will be regular check-ins, not from a micromanagement, but more from a reporting, how's things going, checking in on probably a slightly more frequent basis than once a year, definitely a more quarterly kind of approach to how things are. But other than that, I think the idea is from the moment people come in, there's not this kind of dislike between the agent and the tenant. There's not this kind of like push and pull. We're trying to just, treat each other like human beings. And I think that's probably the biggest change we would see in the management of the properties.
Right. So there's no real structural changes. We're still using the same tenancy agreements. Legally, the structure is still the same as an HMO. It's the approach and the group of people together and how they're actually living in the place.
Yeah. And I think from the research we did, there's definitely been a kind of pulling out of the market from some investors in the HMO space. There's definitely kind of a reduction. And from the few sort of HMO investors we spoke to who were coming out of the market, the biggest concern and problem they had was that there were some voids. And, when those voids were happening, it was at times, depending on where the location of property was, it was a little bit more difficult for them to kind of fill those spaces. And actually what we're doing here and what we're kind of promoting is that sense of belonging. You should have less voids. You should have less people who want to move on to something maybe that's not massively different than what they've got. It just could be the dynamics in the property between the tenants, and that bit we want to give the most care to is the dynamic of the tenants. And if we put a little bit more effort into that, I think the chances are that the more people will stay for longer. That's the kind of business, that's the kind of business model behind it, really. That
was the first thing that went through my mind when you were talking about it. God, your voids should be so much better managing on this sort of basis than the coming and going of HMOs, which it's always the hidden cost of HMOs is the void periods that get very difficult to calculate and manage.
And I think that, that really is the key here, is the structure is very, very much the same, because there's no huge differences in terms of change of layout. Actually, if any HMO investor is thinking, I've had enough of this, actually they can still hold their property, let to us, and we could bring a different spin to it, and I think it's it's a change in kind of, it's a change in the approach. It's more hands off for the investor, but it's a longer term contract, and maybe it's something that those investors might think, do you know what, this is better for us. And like I say, it makes it easier for us because we're not necessarily just going after building up a massive property portfolio ourselves. Actually the key is the number of properties we bring in, but it's kind of for a bigger purpose than just ourselves.
Yeah, it's actually having a purpose and meaning of what you're trying to do, rather than just trying to make as much money as possible or own as much property as possible.
Yeah, and you're in property. I've been in property. It's not an easy business to be in. So we're kind of like we're really looking at how there's still this ongoing housing shortage. That's not going to change until we build more properties. But the housing stock we have, it's how can we repurpose it for more people who need it, and that's definitely something that this strategy is about. It's looking at a corner of the market that's, not necessarily growing, but there are properties in this space. How do we treat people better in that space? Because there's a lot of good HMO investors and landlords out there. There's some that probably just get sick and tired of it and then don't put any time or effort into it. So really it's that kind of, real niche part of the market that we, if the work's been done, why not just rent it to us? So that's a little plea out there, if any HMO investors who've had enough, come and have a chat.
And yeah, I think in every aspect of property, it's getting more difficult. So people exiting the property market, HMOs, service accommodation, whatever. But yeah, let's talk about how that would work actually for an existing landlord, fed up of all the changes in legislation, all the licensing with HMOs as well. I'm just thinking of selling. Peter, what should we do? Would you sublet it for me?
100%, yeah. And I mean, it's as simple as how you've just proposed it, really. As long as the property doesn't need huge kind of renovation, maybe a bit kind of a lick of paint, and maybe a bit of renovation here and there. But ultimately, if the property is well positioned, well put together in terms of its layout, I'm confident we could let that quite quickly. I'm confident we could take that on a long-term contract, and I'm confident we could hand it back to you if you wanted to in exactly the same state with very little voids at the end of it.
Right, and that would be your preference to do it, is rent it, what, sort of like a 5-year agreement with the landlord, that sort of time?
Yeah, that kind of thing. A kind of 5-year contract, and I suppose it's just very similar to how the commercial property world works, isn't it? So yeah, I think that kind of longer term, kind of rental subletting of the property overall would be ideal for us.
Oh, yeah, and then the landlord would just get a fixed rent every month, I take it.
Yeah.
The ups and downs depending on voids and
and we can review that, I suppose, over a period of time if there's huge changes in the market. But yeah, kind of like a fixed term rent for 5 years. You don't need to do anything, especially if you were considering exiting the market. For now, hold on to it, just keep it. We'll come back to it in 5 years, 10 years, see where you're at. And I suppose what we'd like in those periods, as our kind of community grows, is the ability to purchase these properties, or at least have first refusal if the landlord definitely wanted to still exit. Because if we've got a community in there of 5 or 7 people and they're happy there and don't want to move, we don't want to suddenly take the property away from them. That would be terrible. So yeah, that's a big part of it. I think it's just that kind of option to buy at any point would be ideal.
Yep, no, that makes sense. Once you made the community to keep them together rather than the landlord just sells. So from the landlord's perspective, basically pay me a fixed rent, doesn't matter how many tenants you've got in there or not, that's your problem. I just get my fixed rent every month. And maintenance is the other concern that goes through my head on something like that. Is that something you guys would pick up, or would that all be down to the landlords?
No, I think in terms of using the commercial property kind of analogy, really, yeah, we would look after maintenance of that property, and return it in the same state, probably better than what it was, in terms of its management. And I think this is a really important part on maintenance. It's like the biggest issues I found about maintenance, obviously, is when people are leaving, and how a lot of people leave a property because it's not their home, And I think by really switching that emphasis to tenants feeling like and owning, sharing something, essentially they're owning a property, they got a stake in the business. So that property, from a mindset, they own a share of that property somewhere along the line. So, it's about how people treat that property. It's how people look after it. There's just that changing emphasis of, all renters are bad, because they're not, they're just not at all. Some definitely are, some terrible, but, I think there's just this wrong mindset at the moment in the whole property space around this kind of us and them thing, and really what we're trying to do is just create a better foundation of, for whatever reason you want to rent, and not everybody wants to own a property. Let's be honest about that. A lot of people are very happy renting, the flexibility it gives them, a job they might have where they have to move quite regularly. They don't want the headache of maintenance, selling, moving, all that kind of stuff. They just want to pick the stuff up and go when they need to go. For those people who want that flexibility, what renting gives them, or for those people who, don't want to own because they like what renting gives them in terms of just the ability of no real big headaches, this is a perfect kind of way to have that longer term secure tenancy if you need it.
Yeah, I love the idea, as you were saying earlier, about potentially, if some works need to be done around the house and the tenant can do it, why wouldn't they just do it rather than, as you say, phoning the agent, getting the okay from the landlords, which makes everything. It's that sense of ownership again, isn't it? They want to make the house actually better because they see it as their home and just a rented room.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the philosophy around big house co-living is kind of like they're not over designed, they're kind of like a blank canvas. So, even to the point, this first house we're doing in Hastings, the initial kind of core group of the two tenants are really interested in not just going out and buying lots of kind of flat pack furniture. They want to kind of do this recycle kind of approach. So they've kind of brought in this philosophy that they're going to bring in furniture that either they already own, maybe their bedroom stuff, but actually for the communal and shared areas spaces, they want to go to places that are upcycling, recycling, kind of taking old property, reuse, then just that philosophy of that planet friendliness. And I think that's really what the core of all this kind of principle of a different type of, isn't for everybody. I think that's, that's clear. Some people, and I think that's what we need in the rental space. We just need different choice for different people, and if you want this type of living where you can come in, you can furnish it how you want, you can even paint it how you want, and you can start to live with people who have a similar sort of outlook on life to you. For whatever reason you're in this HMO, it's fine, but it can still be and feel like your home. That's what this space is all about. And I think there's enough people out there who want that, so, I mean, time will tell with that, obviously, but, from the conversations we've had so far with potential tenants for properties in Hastings, it's kind of more like a shock, like, why are you asking us these questions? Why do you care about this? So it's kind of like it is a shock, to some people. It's like, well, okay, but once they get into the idea of it, that they can see that the opportunities are there. So it's something different, and it just needs a bit of time to kind of bed in.
Love that example you use on the Hastings properties, actually getting the tenants together before they move into the property. So they're choosing colour schemes, furniture,
Yeah.
rather than virtually every other HMO is all just IKEA furniture throughout, isn't it?
And that's okay. That's like some people want the, clean look, Scandinavian IKEA look, and that's absolutely fine. If we're doing it from a different standpoint, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you've got a group of people that actually want to commit to this way, kind of starts to set the tone a little bit. Well, why can't we do that? Everywhere. So we're just consuming everywhere, aren't we? And I think that's the key. Really, there's enough stuff out there to kind of use. We don't need to necessarily buy new and kind of build it if it's already done. So.
Absolutely not. So, but I mean, I'm intrigued now. So the Hastings property, no tenants in it at all yet, but have you got all the tenants lined up, or?
We've got 3 out of 4. The three that have come together kind of already know each other or have some link. So this is the other side of what we can do, actually, is that we can definitely help people come together, who've got that kind of shared purpose but don't know each other. Or we can work with a group of people who already know each other, and it can just become like a house share for them. And we can try and fit in people from our own marketing who fit their way of lifestyle. We wouldn't just helicopter somebody in to fill the room. There's a time frame to fill that room, and we would allow those people to do. I suppose the 3 in Hastings need to start doing. We've got quite a long list now, actually, probably close to 16, who are interested in a property, who viewed it. But it will be up to the 3 who are already there to make that final decision. It wouldn't be on us. Again, that real sense of belonging, of having that choice of who those people are, which again is slightly different, but I think it's important. Because if you mess up that dynamic, the other 3 might move out, and then you're left with 1. So what's the point?
Love it. I love the way you get the 3 that you've already got to interview the 4th rather than you choose. You're not going to be. Yeah. Makes total sense. What I'm intrigued by, though, how you found those people, or because you've got an HMO property that could suit anybody, but you want the people with this sense of community who want to do it as a co-living space rather than just, I need somewhere to live. So I wonder, do they come to you because of marketing you're doing over that aspect of things, compared to you're not putting a little advert up on Rightmove or Gumtree for room in shared house type thing?
So, but both. I think where you've started to go with this is important, because I think what we found with our initial marketing Hastings project is a lot of people, where we're advertising a room in a shared HMO, we're getting people who are used to living in an HMO, so they have that coming with their own stuff, want the place, needing it by a certain date, want to move in. So there's definitely some work to do there with those people, because they are a particular type of tenant who are used to a particular type of living and need somewhere to live and like the look of the property. On the other side, we've got ongoing marketing where we're kind of marketing a way of living, or a change in the rental space. So people who are more attuned to that kind of need for change, or that feeling of belonging in the rental system. So by bringing both in, both need work, both need time, our time, but that's essentially our management role in this, is to give both type of tenants the time they need to get their head or their mindset right for this type of living. So yeah, there's a sense of bringing the 2 together, and I hope that it kind of works itself out, in terms of people who come together at the right time. And that, that's definitely been the hardest part from the beginning, is building up a big enough kind of ecosystem of people sort of start to marry it together, and I think that's just going to take a bit of time, like any project or business. It just needs that time to keep going. But the idea is, once people are connected to this idea that there's a new way of renting, especially in an HMO, we've got ways to communicate with those people and then really start to bring them in. And I suppose the hopefully clever bit here, is that over time those people will tell us where they want to live and who they want to live with, so we can go out and find properties in those places. So that's the kind of long-term business plan, if you like, is once we build up that ecosystem, we've got people then who we know what they want. We know the type of living. They've probably already formed a core group and a bit of a community. And then what we can do is, we can go and look for properties specific to their needs and kind of match make that way. So that's the hope it works out that way.
So I'm doing just a huge more amount of communication between yourselves as the property manager and the tenants, because a lot of the time the letting agency doesn't want to hear from the tenant as long as they're paying their rent, and the tenant, why would I talk to the letting agent unless there's a problem with the house? But you seem to be much more involved in that relationship.
Yeah, and I think that, when you break property rental down, there is like, you living in the property, it's okay. No, you don't hear from tenants very much when the property's okay. You only hear about when there's something wrong, and that's okay. But I think, there's enough communication tools now where you can very simply check in, whether that's text-based or voice-based. You can check in just to check that everything is okay. And as a tenant, or as a customer, I'd much rather somebody actually be checking in to see if I'm all right from time to time than not. So, it could go a long way. It could identify a problem. We could be more kind of preventative, in terms of, something that's going on that we might identify. But yeah, ultimately, I think the property sector can communicate a lot better, and I think there is just this kind of hierarchical kind of push and pull. And maybe that's where some people, from a tenant perspective, just don't really value or, value the property, over time, and I just think it's really about a sense of self-worth and just understanding that, at the end of the day, a happy tenant is, a long-term rent, and then you've got a good property forever. So it just kind of makes sense to me, really. But yeah, that's the key to it, I would say. Our communication from the very beginning as to how we bring people into the ecosystem. And we want it to be an ecosystem. I know it's kind of a bit of a woo word, but actually what we probably see is that people come into the ecosystem of co-living are more likely in the future to want to live in co-housing in the future. So there's this kind of stepping stone approach to a time in your life when you want something different. Maybe it's an urban co-living space you want now, but in the future, a family-based rural kind of co-housing project, then you're already in this place. And I think there's something there, in terms of building the business for the future.
I love you. You're basically just breaking with tradition.
Right. Trying.
Yeah, because when we talk about the property, there's not that much different between a standard HMO property and what you're talking about, with light space. But it's your approach to it that's not traditional, and the approach the tenants need, whereas normally most tenants don't like their landlords because they don't do work at all to the property. There's no relationship. It always feels a bit of a fight.
Yeah.
Your approach to it is just so much nicer from everybody's perspective.
Well, I mean, that's great to hear that it is nicer. And I feel it's the same in so much in society these days, that we've kind of lost that real sense of, whatever you want to call it, community, connection, just this real kind of trust. We're always thinking that this person, is wrong, and, but most of us are absolutely fine. We're just nice people, just trying to live this life and crack on with what we do, and I think the more I've been in property, I've not necessarily seen bad people, have just seen bad practices just continue to grow and grow. And I think sometimes when people come in new and they might learn or mentor off somebody, they learn those bad practices of how it's done. And they might make a lot of money. They might do okay. They might, might be financially okay. But, for me, if you're going to do something, you got, it's about doing it the right way. And I think you've said it right. It's that breaking with tradition of bad practice rather than anything else. Just really doing things for the right reasons. And that's ultimately, without the tenant, you haven't got a business. So it just makes sense to look after them and hope that they look after you in the property the same way. I think that's. I think we've lost that.
That's because it's not even necessarily bad practice. It's just that's the way we've always done things, and no one's really thought about it in a better. Yeah, which is exactly what you guys are doing. It's the same thing, but just a different approach to it. And yeah, really, really love what you're doing there, Pete.
Great, thanks, Dave. Good, nice to hear you.
Cool. No, it's been really good catching up with you. Yeah, and looking forward to what we delve into on the next chats.
Yeah, I guarantee it'll be around community, that's for sure.
Yeah, really, really love that, and really love what you're doing. It's just a really fresh approach to the property market that I haven't heard from anybody else at all. So
nice.
Keep up the good work.
Cheers, Dave. See you soon.
Talking to you. Cheers, Peter. Thanks. Bye.